Everyone loves music and has emotional responses to different types of music. Music creates a bridge to heal and transform you. It can help you move through blocks or obstructions. How can you use music to ground yourself spiritually, to deal with conflict resolution, a crisis of faith, or to deal with personal, community, or global situations? You use kindness, gratitude, and acceptance. This is how a bridge is created, and this is the love and wisdom Bill Protzmann brings to the table. Enjoy as I play one of Bill's songs, Opus 1, from his album Serenity. That was absolutely beautiful. Ah, welcome everyone to Angel Heart Radio. I'm your host, Deb Goldberg, and it brings me great pleasure to be here with you today. And it's an honor to serve you in the highest way that I can by bringing you messages of divine love and blessings for your life. You are dearly loved, cherished, and blessed. I have a special guest tonight. His name is Bill Protzmann. He's a publisher, author, composer, musician, practical heart skills trainer, life leadership, and executive coach and public speaker. Bill is a man on a mission to raise awareness of the power of music as self-care. He is a successful IT entrepreneur who holds magna cum laude degrees in piano performance and creative writing, and brings music to audiences in non-traditional ways. In 2011, he launched Music Care Inc., a for-purpose corporation that teaches practical ways music can be used for self-care. His work was recognized by the National Council of Behavioral Health with an Award of Excellence in 2014, the behavioral health equivalent of a winning an Oscar. Welcome, Bill. Welcome to Angel Heart Radio.
Deb, it's such a pleasure to be here. I just loved listening to that piece again. Thank you for playing it.
Oh, it was just a favorite out of a bunch of ones that you sent me, and it just really creates a lot of peace inside of me and joy. So I thought, oh, I really like this. I want to share it with everybody.
I really appreciate that. That was such a surprise for me to create that piece, because I had no intention of doing so. At the time that it happened, they just asked me to sit down and play something while they got the microphones and the levels set in the studio. And that's what happened. And it's uncut right from the heart. There it is.
Mm-hmm. So that was a channeled song, a divinely channeled song.
I think so. There was a lot in me that needed to come out, and that was the start of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point in Music Care? Everybody, I'm sure, really would like to know.
It's such a great thing being a musician. I just can't express how amazing that is, because our job is to offer emotion to an audience, and that could range from the scary to the beautiful. It's all part of what we have to do, and our responsibility as musicians is to learn how to be the best at creating that experience on whatever instrument we're using, whether that's voice or drums or the piano or horns or guitars, and then to sort of step out of the technical way and let the music flow. I think it's Zig Ziglar that says, it isn't what comes from me, it's what comes through me. And it feels like that. You know, you're doing your job, you're making the fingers or whatever happen, and all of the technical aspects of what you have to do are in place so that you can step away from it and allow it to happen. The one thing that's tricky is being able to connect with the emotions in an authentic way, so that when you allow that music to come out, it comes with the emotional content. And we've all heard performances that are flat. All you have to do is go to a piano recital, right? Where there's a bunch of kids learning to play. And that was me. You know, I could play the notes. But as you become more mature and more competent in your performance, something else comes into it. And maybe it's timing, or there's things that you could say that actually, you know, you could practice these technical aspects. But the real feeling of it, the real emotion of it, comes with nothing more than experience. And that's experience in life as well as experience with your instrument. So as you gain experience in life, the richness of your own life becomes obvious to those who are listening to your music. And that's a phenomenal thing. It's just hard to explain in any other way. Mozart said one time, well, was it Mozart? Yes, I think it was. He said, you shouldn't play anything that I've written until you're old enough, you know, to really understand it emotionally. And that's weird, because here we think emotions and we're using our head to understand our heart. It's all wrapped up together in the same place. But when you finally feel it and it feels satisfying to you, that's the magic moment in making music. I've been fortunate, I guess, because my mom was a teacher and started me off, but it took me a long time before I felt that emotional connection to what I was doing. And it took an audience to actually, it took me playing ragtime in 5th grade for an audience for me to feel what it is like for that to have happened in live performance. Such an amazing thing. And so once you've felt that, it's like a drug. You have to keep living for that, because watching people light up is such a gratifying thing. So that's what music is all about, and like in the big picture. Of course, there's all these other amazing aspects too, because it makes us feel things and can heal and can energize us or make us relax. There's so many things you can do with it. But it all comes back to something, I know you're very close to this, is the authenticity of what you're bringing. Whether you're bringing that as a prayer, or bringing that as a speech or a piece of music, or even just as we do in Reiki, allowing the energy to come through. There's so many ways that you can bring that. And I'm just so blessed that music is one that works for me, you know, and having accepted that, and as you mentioned, sort of taking it as a mission, it's a beautiful thing to be with people when the lights come on and they really get music for the first time.
It certainly is. And, you know, it's amazing how, you know, I don't know, like what you were talking about, that you have to understand it. You just feel it.
Yeah, you do.
You just feel it throughout your body. And it creates emotion. It creates, well, I guess all different types of music can create all different types of feelings, right? And
Oh,
you can
sure.
talk about that, right?
Sure. When you're putting a program together, you want to make sure your audience has a satisfying experience. And oftentimes, the music that you choose is the best way that you can get there. So, like telling a story, you know, and you start out at once upon a time, so there's an introduction, right? And the music that you play has to invite people in to want to hear more. And then you build the characters and the plot, and things start to get, you know, complicated. And the music can do that too, building towards some kind of a climax. And then you offer resolution so that people aren't just left with sound and fury. They want to come back to something and put their feet back on the ground and feel like they're present in the room once again. So if you're doing a smart program, it will have those components in it. And it's pretty easy to do with music because composers tend to write music that does that anyway. So you might have a song that has a beginning, middle, and an end, and then contrast that with another song that seems to be very, very static, and just maybe it's modern music and just sort of like pokes away at you consistently until you can't take it anymore. And then after that, you offer something that's more melodic, so people can go, "Oh yes, well, Bill didn't really mean to be that annoying," but that was interesting music. And now we have, so it's that sort of thought process that you want to guide people through to make a satisfying performance happen. And you know, if you've ever been to one of those stadium concerts, it's so obvious there, because there's that moment where everybody lights their lighters, and now it's cell phones. We use our cell phone flashlights these days. But all of a sudden, everybody seems like they're unified in their purpose of being there. Not that they weren't from the beginning, but it just sort of magically happens. And then you might wind up like in a half an hour long sing along or whatever. But there's that moment of magic, and the band is aware of that. They're going to do this on purpose, and you know it's coming. So it's very intentional what we do, in the same kind of way that the creative arts are. They offer you a journey. And sometimes that journey is pleasant, and sometimes it's a little annoying. And if the musician is on top of it, or the band is on top of it, they'll annoy you on purpose to create that tension so they can release it in the next song. It's a fabulous manipulation, and we all just go for it, like seeing a scary movie, right? It's going to be scary. We all know we're going to be afraid. So the band does that too, and that is to help you have a deeper experience of the music than you would otherwise have. And you know, we all experience it differently. Some people get it, and some people are there. Like I love to go into the symphony concerts, and I've done this too. I've fallen asleep at the symphony, and I'm just thinking, okay, doesn't matter. Even if you're asleep, the music is still getting into you. And maybe that's the best sleep that you have for those, 40 minutes or whatever it is. Maybe that's the best sleep you've ever had. And the music is there giving you the opportunity to release and let go and be a present. It is full presence. And let that work on you, whatever that work might be, giving you rest if that's what it takes.
That's a wonderful perspective. I never thought about that before. Having a perspective of that even if you fall asleep during a symphony, that it would be helping you rest. And yes, we're still taking everything in when we're asleep. We're still
Especially
hearing.
sound. Yes. The science on it, which is fascinating to me. A guy who's a classical pianist and also a surgeon at in Massachusetts, I think Massachusetts General Hospital, Dr. Claudius Conrad. He was curious about music and how it would work on his patients. So he played music for patients in the ICU. So if you're in the ICU, many times you're not fully conscious. You're recovering. You've been through a lot, so your system is not yet fully awake, and maybe you're medicated to stay asleep. But he found that people just listening to music, awake or asleep, needed half the pain medication of people who weren't listening. And 50% is a pretty big number in the sciences. I mean, we get all excited about 10 to 15% of improvement of something, but 50, half the pain meds. So there's this power, and I'm so happy that we have neuroscience and things that are investigating it now. But I just think of the people who are asleep in whatever venue there happen to be. If you're at home with your headphones on, just taking a power nap, wow, the opening to the potential your own system has to heal is so great when you stimulate it with music.
I totally agree. Music can always take me to a different mood.
Yes.
Always to pick me up or help bring me down or neutralize me.
Yes. And that neutral place is so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I like to choose music that I need. So rather than waiting for the trigger, if I'm just whatever, if I'm in this place where I'm just not feeling the way I want to feel and I can match music to that, then that feeling passes more quickly than if I just ignored it or stuffed it. I mean, guys, if you're listening, guys, yeah, do we stuff emotions? We stuff them pretty well. We've learned how to do that. So I welcome them and let them play with the music. And that puts me in that neutral place where I can sort of choose the next thing that I want. And that neutral place is so wonderful. If we could spend a lot of time in that neutral place, it'd be amazing. But so often, you know how this goes. We're triggered, Deb, and we just react. And I mean, it's kind of normal. Take some work to get out in front of your reactions. But the emotions are there to help you recognize that there's a need for you to react, to do something. And you do have some space and time if you can feel them okay, and sort of know, oh yeah, that's fear. Oh no, I shouldn't be afraid of that. That's not something that really is scary, although it did trigger my fear. That neutral place, you can go, oh yeah, well, this makes sense. I understand now why I'm enraged because somebody cut me off in traffic, or why I'm so happy because the cat came up and purred in my lap, right? It's like, wow, this is so cool. And you can enjoy that. I mean, it's kind of strange to enjoy fear or anger, but you can enjoy the fact that your system recognizes that. And like all our other emotions, just flows through. It's just this non-binary flow of richness, like a rainbow of feeling just flooding your system.
Yeah, I even remember, and I think I mentioned this to you in our talk at one time, that I, as a teenager, going through some really difficult trauma, I turned to music. I filled myself with music and sang with the music. And it was something that helped me get through lots of different moments through my teenagehood. And, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're talking about the emotional response to music and how you can move forward through obstructions and blocks, which is what you're talking about, and how it became a coping mechanism for me to distract me from pain, emotional pain. So it's just so amazing that something so beautiful, because I think music is just beautiful, can do so much for you. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about conflict resolution and how you can spiritually ground yourself. And we talked about kindness and gratitude and acceptance when we first started, as ways to create a bridge, but how you can spiritually ground yourself too through music.
I love the spiritual grounding
Mm-hmm.
idea. And if you're listening to this and you're a churchgoer, music has been in church for a long time to spiritually ground us. And back before we could know what the language was, like when the Catholic monks were chanting in Latin, the idea was not that we would understand them, but that there would be this space created, this heavenly choir of angels kind of space created by the music itself. And that openness, which is actually an openness to something bigger than us, something ethereal, something spiritual, actually accentuated the fact that in the cathedral, there you were with your feet on the floor, your knees on the prayer rail. You were so earthbound, while at the same time, this heavenly music was there, just opening you to the possibility, to the potential that there's something more than you stuck on the floor. And that's been, well, at least in the West, music has been religious like that for such a long time. And I use the word religious advisedly because there are places where you can feel that spiritual pull that music has that aren't necessarily connected to religion. And that's a wonderful thing too. They're connected in those places more toward a way of life. And where there might not be a quote religion in place, there's definitely a practice of music that is intended to open you to something more, to something bigger. And you'll find those sort of practices in indigenous cultures, where there are still indigenous cultures available to observe anyway. But we have some historical records of the fact that music has always been a part of the opening to the spirit, to something bigger, whether that's ancient drum circles, because drumming was kind of the first way we got started with rhythm, or just hollering, people hollering at each other back in the day. Our ancestors had much bigger vocal capabilities than we do. We don't need to be able to yell that loud. But can you imagine where if your job was like to be the caller and you would stand on a mountaintop and you'd holler across the valley to somebody on the other side who would hear you, you'd need some pretty big lungs. And you'd get pretty good at it with that kind of practice. You could make some beautiful sounds. Someday maybe we'll figure out what those sounds were. But I love the notion of the invitation in sound and rhythm to something beyond just us, just something that's consciousness or God or whatever you want to call that something else, the spiritual. That's such a beautiful part of what music does, especially when it stops us and centers us and makes us aware that we can be completely present without anything more than just this sound in the room or in the cathedral or around the fire, wherever it is.
I totally agree. I listen to music every morning when I meditate, and it like takes me right there. It just opens me up and allows me to be peaceful, and feel the oneness, and my spiritual practice. And even Christmas music, because it's the holidays now. And even though I'm Jewish, I love Christmas music. I love Christmas music. And it takes me to such a place of closeness, to God, to Jesus, and feeling love, profound love that, to the point where I can even shed tears listening to this music. And And, you know, it's really unfortunate if people can't connect in some way to whatever kind of music that works for them, to bring them to a place of really feeling what's in their heart and the substance of what they're made of.
You've reminded me of an amazing experience I had that surprised me, a musical experience that surprised me. I had the opportunity to attend, and I can't remember whether it was Rosh Hashanah. It was a high holy day in the Jewish synagogue, and some friends invited me to go, and I had never heard the shofar before. If you're listening, you don't know what a shofar is. It's basically a ram's horn that's been sawed off on one end so that you can blow on it like a trumpet. It sounds a little bit like the Hawaiian conch shells, where they drill the end of the shell and they blow into that. It makes a big fat sound. And the man, I believe, who was playing it was very accomplished, and the cantor was like singing at the same. It was, oh my gosh, I get chills up my spine just thinking about it now. Even though it's not what we would consider to be Western music, it is so musical, and the spiritual invitation is there. It's a call to prayer, it's a call to worship. You know, it's an opening to the other that surprised me in such a way. And of course, you know, growing up in the Christian tradition, you read the Bible and you know that this instrument exists because you read about it. But the first time you hear it, oh my gosh, what an amazing experience that is.
It's beautiful.
It was novel, so much more so than Western music did for me or has done for me in church. That really grabbed me in a way that was transformative. And like I said, it's one of those things you'll never forget that when it happens. They have the same kinds of interesting instruments, I guess you could say, in the East, connected to the Sufi tradition. I'm a big fan of the poet Rumi, but the music that might have been played when Rumi was reciting is so foreign to our Western ears. It sounds almost dissonant, but if you engage with it, there's so much in it that you can get without intellectualizing it too much and just allowing it to come into you. It's a fantastic experience to do this with holy music, should we call it holy music, that isn't familiar to you, because you know, first of all, that it's got a holy purpose. So you're in the lane and go, okay, well, maybe this will have an effect on me, maybe it won't. But the call is to spirituality. And then to listen to music and you think, wow, this really does it for many people. What's it doing for me with my Western ears? And you can do that with music from the Middle East or music from Asia, which is also transportive in such an amazing way. And it's available. I mean, Spotify, you can go online and hear all this music for the first time. What an incredible opportunity to like re-enliven your spiritual practice around some new music that invites you in a new way. You've probably heard the Tuvan throat singers, the people who can make 3 or 4 pitches at the same moment. That's holy music. If you are listening and want to try that, just say ah, and then whistle at the same time. You'll get some idea of how it works. But they can do 3 pitches, which is something through the nose. I don't know. It's amazing music and just takes you to a great place. Making all those vibrations in your own skull, like in your own head, that's very intimate. And if you do it well, whether you're chanting the Om or singing a Christmas carol, doesn't matter. If you do it well, you're going to feel that amazing. They call it, I think it's ASMR, but it's that chills that you get where you feel your spine tingling and your skin's prickly and stuff. That's how you know you've connected deeply with something.
Yeah. And, you know, I've also listened to klezmer music, which
Oh
is
my gosh, yes.
Yiddish folk music. And, you know, not really been brought up around it, but I used to go to some folk concerts and they used to play a lot of klezmer, and I would just feel it in my DNA, in my bones, like I just wanted to dance.
Oh yeah.
Like it felt like it's my music from a Jewish heritage, not really knowing what it was. So it and that is spiritual too. It's a spiritual experience to feel that in your soul, in your DNA. it's amazing.
Often in the world, those people who still have their traditional music are hanging on to the very last shred of their heritage in many ways. And this isn't the case with Jewish music. We have the klezmer bands that we have a couple of Spotify playlists. One of them is actually playing Christmas carols, like Western Christmas carols. It's the most incredible music I think I've ever heard. So amazingly complex. And I don't even want to compare it to anything, but having been in a Dixieland band, I can tell you that it feels a lot like that. It's just this happy, joyous, energetic, authentic, and acoustic music that's played over all of the right traditionally appropriate scales, so it sounds a little bit off. And they do like Jingle Bells with a Jewish scale, so that it's got tiny little tweaks to it that don't sound exactly right, and yet they sound perfect when you hear the klezmer band play them. Oh, it's such an incredible thing to explore new music that way. So if you're listening, yeah, check out klezmer music on Spotify. You'll be amazed. It's incredible.
It is. Oh.
So how do we get off on that?
I don't know. I don't know. We were going to go to conflict resolution and a crisis of faith, and how music builds a bridge with all of that, which we've been touching on.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
I guess let's take this from a very interesting perspective. I've done a lot of work with veterans, so I read the veterans literature. And one of the things that surprised me in, I think it was in the Sun magazine, I subscribed to Sun magazine, was an interview with two gentlemen. And if you're Jewish, you probably know this, but in Israel, everyone serves in the military. That's just how it works. I think as 18 years old, you go in and you're in for 2 years, and some reenlist, but of course you're in. So not a great place to have to go into the military because you get a lot of action. Your life is literally on the line if you're in the military, and you're prepared, and the amazing service that you give to your country. I mean, there's so many good things about it. But these two gentlemen had both been served in the military very early, one in Israel and the other one in Palestine. And the reason that there was an interview with them in this magazine was because they wanted to talk about what these two guys have done. And what they have done is basically form what we call in America a nonprofit, Soldiers for Peace. I'm not sure if that's the actual name because the translation isn't exact. But this gentleman from Palestine, this gentleman from Israel come together with other veterans who want to work toward peace. And for me, that's like, wow. How can you imagine what it would be like, if something like that were to take place around music? Like, what if all the red states and all the blue states could get together and make music together? Okay, that's a huge problem. Probably won't happen. But I have, folks in my family who come from both of the political traditions in the United States, and they're both people are great people. I mean, this is an interesting place to go because you have your convictions and you believe in them strongly, and yet you're related, in my case, by blood. So what do you do in that place? How do you get through the conflict? How do you get back to dialogue? How do you work around things that can be very hateful? What's the way forward on that? And this is a timely question because here we are in a country right now that's pretty divided in a lot of ways. And obviously, if you're hearing this right now, we've got the whole impeachment thing going on. If you're hearing this later on, we probably will have gotten through that, but the division remains. And the idea, just like those soldiers in Israel and Palestine, how do you come together around something and move forward again instead of just digging into your foxholes and taunting each other? And for thousands and thousands of years, music has been a way to do that. It's been a way to sit down and do something else other than fighting with each other. But that other thing that you're doing, the musical thing that you're doing, whether you're in a drum circle together or singing together, or actually even working in a band together, that opens us up to possibilities that we don't get opened to in any other way.
Mm-hmm.
And it does things to us that can't be done to us in any other way. So what are the openings? The openings are to make music. If you and I are going to drum together, Deb, I'm going to learn something about you as you play your drum, and you're going to learn something about me. It won't be information so much as it will be attitude or connection.
Mm-hmm.
You'll learn that I like to play the drum a certain way, and you'll adjust your playing, and we'll be working together in a rhythm instead of making different rhythms. And I'll learn that you like to play a certain way, and I'll adjust my playing to support what you're. And this is just automatic. It isn't something that you teach. It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And in that place of co-creating music, that's one of the most amazing moments where all the other stuff just falls away and you're nothing except music together. And if we could get to a place like that with intention and purpose,
Mm-hmm.
we could help to solve some of the conflicts that are out there. I've seen this in real life so many times where I used to run a drum circle for homeless people, and homeless people are very strong. The community is very strong, but there are also people who don't fit well. And if somebody who doesn't fit well comes along, it's tension starts.
Mm-hmm.
But if that person comes along and sits down in a drum circle and starts playing, all of a sudden they become part of a bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a bigger endeavor; it's just a bigger experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a welcoming that comes about because of that doesn't happen in any other way. I'm not advocating that the entire United States goes out and does a giant drum circle together, although that could be one way forward. But it certainly works well in families,
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're in a place where communication is hard, like being a teenager. Remember when we were teenagers and we didn't want to tell our parents anything? And
Mm-hmm.
in that place, you can learn things about your family that you couldn't learn in another way. If you're a teenager, you might learn that your parent is there to support you in this drum thing that you're doing. And, take a solo, teenager of mine, and we'll be there. We'll support you, and it lets you open up and expand in ways that you aren't free to do in the more traditional forms of communication.
Mm-hmm.
So this music, by sort of triangulating it, putting a third thing into the mix that we can both circle around, it gives us a common purpose that also does all this transformative work. It lessens pain, helps us heal, opens us to the higher spiritual potential that we have. All of that happens while you're sitting there banging on a drum.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of any other activity that we could share that is that free of conflict and that amazingly powerful for all the ways, physical, emotional, mental, even spiritual. It's got all that in it. And you don't even have to mention all that. You just start drumming.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're fortunate enough to sing in a choir, you just start singing together.
Right.
And it all falls away. And you're just there in the moment of the music. Does that sound so woo-woo, crystal crunchy? But it's true.
I don't think so. I think it's an amazing way to look at how people come together. And I think it fits right in what we were mentioning, kindness and gratitude and acceptance.
Sure.
And playing music together is coming together in a certain way because you're enjoying. It's opening you up and enjoying the passion of doing it and what it's creating inside of you. But this is for all of us, is opening up to a kinder place in our heart and acceptance of we don't have to believe the same things and still be equal. We don't have to look the same way. We are still equal. God's created everybody equally. There is no difference and there's no separation. So, and having gratitude, which I keep getting reminded of, is that you have this life and the miracle that you are and the miracle that life is and the miracle that other people are. And, we might have a political discrepancy but there's plenty of other topics to talk about, right? That
Yes.
you do come together on. And it's funny because I take everything to a really deep level of understanding myself. And the conflict that we see on the outside is, to me, a reflection of what goes on inside of each of us. There's a war going on inside of all of us of how do there's so many aspects to ourselves and complexity that learning how to get into the rhythm of all the different parts of us and playing nice, that we're all playing the sandbox nice together, right?
Yep. Yep.
Because we have parts of us, aspects that believe one way, and you have other aspects of yourself that believe a totally different way, and it could be about the same topic. So there's so many extremes that go on within our own self. And so I think that the more that we recognize that the conflict's really within ourself, and this takes a lot of kindness and compassion and self-love and gratitude to work on all of those things so that we can have the conversations that we need to have outside of ourselves.
Well said. Well said. There's implied in every sound, there's tension and release. Vibration means that something is compressed and then let go at the same time. Sound waves, they have a peak and a trough. So the idea of tension release is natural when you're talking about making music. You need it. Otherwise, you get silence. And silence is like the third component of music. But that tension release. So I've learned as a musician to not be too afraid of tension, because right after that, you're going to get release. And then you're going to get tension again, and then release, and tension, and release. It's like, and as fast as that goes, if you speed it up far enough, you'll get sound. If you speed it further, you're going to get light. This tension release is sort of the way the universe works. Mm-hmm. So where do you fit in that spectrum of tension and release? There are things that trigger me. I'm sure there are things that trigger you. We all get triggered by things. Mm-hmm. That's tension, knocking on the door. Hey, hello, Bill. The release of that tension can be intentional, or you can just sort of allow it when it happens, or you can try to stuff it. I don't want to feel that, and push it aside and try to hold it down because it's not, quote, right. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, it's just tension and release. People like to get all upset about big emotions like fear and anger, and I can't be too angry. They're just emotions. They're going to come and go. But it's what you do with them. And if you can get to a place where you go, oh my gosh, there's that anger again. I just feel so angry right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to go out and do something with it. Mm-hmm. And if you figure out that that energy is available, that tension is available to you, it's just tension. It's bigger than normal, but it's tension. You can do great things with tension, because when you release it, if it's big, you're going to big release too. Mm-hmm. Provided that you have the presence to know what's coming your way, know it's tense, and you can guide the release of that. That's incredible energy. Mm-hmm. And that's, in a really simplified sense, that's what musicians do. We're just there sort of shaping the tension in a way that produces a very satisfying release. It's quite simple, really. I mean, it gets really complex when you're looking at complicated music, or if you're an artist, a complicated painting, or if you're guiding somebody on a spiritual path or through a therapeutic journey. There's a lot of crazy stuff that comes up, and it's pretty big. Mm-hmm. But it's only big because it offers us the opportunity for relief coming after, light, dark, whatever. There's a lot of duality in this. But emotions, being what they are just little signals that say, hey, okay, here's a particular flavor of tension. And it's an invitation for using that energy in the release. Mm-hmm. Like riding a wave, finding the energy in the wave and being able to flow with it instead of always stuffing it or fighting it. Mm-hmm. It'd be terrible if we didn't have silence. It would just be all tension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
But we can have the tension and the release and then the peace before the next tension comes along.
Right. I love the way that you're describing that, because you're looking through a music lens of being a musician, to see all of that, where I might look at it from an emotional point, and saying, and it's taken me a really long time to work through and actually accept my emotions and accept tension and find good ways to for the release.
Yeah, to use it, right?
To use it, yeah. And sometimes it was cleaning.
Sure, right, yes. The simplest things.
Right. Or dancing it off, or
Jogging,
whatever, walking, activity.
We actually have an axe throwing, I don't know what you'd call it, place here in San Diego where you can go and for pay by the hour and just toss axes at, plywood.
Oh my goodness gracious. Well, I think those are all ways that you can work on this, to work on that tension that we all have, that, like you said, it comes and it goes, and there's this constant flow of tension, release, and peace. And it takes a lot of spiritual grounding for you to be conscious of how you're releasing it, that you're not, I call it vomiting on other people.
Yes.
that you're doing it in a way that's actually productive of yourself, and not, bringing all of these other people into it with you. That it's something that is done in a more thoughtful way.
Yes, with an intention. And I actually heard someone say intention meaning in tension, which is an interesting and kind of novel twist on it. But with your intent, you can ride through the tension, or ride the tension, perhaps is a better way of saying it, and ride the release. I mean, it's like riding the waves, right? You ride one up, ride one down, ride up, right? And you get into a rhythm, and it can become pretty cool. Getting everybody on the same page, riding the same wave, music does that. Whether you're singing or drumming, or even just listening to it, and everybody listening in the same room is on the same page. If there's like just a little click happening in the background, everybody's heart rate will sync up. Everybody's breathing will get in the same line. There's some science on how our brains kind of entrain around that to be in the same place. And that's very useful. If you're going to a football game, for example, the band is going to play the fight song. It's going to get everybody up and, pumped up. If you're going to the dance club, the beat's going to get you moving. If you're going to sleep and you want to put on some music, so that power of music to work on us physiologically without us even really engaging with it, it's our ears are doing the job. That's a beautiful thing, especially when tensions are high. I always thought, when I was going to church, I was a member of church committees and whatever, you've never seen the heat come like it does in a church committee, people. It's incredible to me. But I just thought, why can't we all just stop here and start singing something that we like? Sing a hymn, we all know, right? To kind of change the energy in the room. Seemed like a good idea, but I wasn't the committee chair, so good as it was, it never really happened. But wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, can you just see somebody at, I don't know, pick a conflict situation. Congress, let's say, start every session of Congress singing the national anthem. So would that change things? We used to do that in school. We'd say the pledge and sing the anthem.
Yeah, it could.
You never know until you try, right?
Yeah.
Back in our history, at least in America, there were corporate songs. Ford had a corporate song, and IBM had a corporate song, and that was how people came together around music. Deb, it's getting dark in here. I'm going to turn on a light, but keep talking because I can hear you, and I'll take you with me.
Okay. Well, I thought this would also be a good time for you to talk about, recovery and how you bring music to vets, all the work that you do, And also talk about your book, More Than Human, the
More than
value.
human.
Yeah, more than human, the value of cultivating the human spirit in your organization. So I want to talk about some of those things.
Well, in fact, the book and veterans are very intimately connected. I was part of a committee, yes, another committee, but working with a nonprofit that was basically a group of other nonprofits that were focused on veterans issues. And one of the big issues in veterans is, of course, recovery from combat, because when you've been raised that killing is wrong, and your job is to go out and break things and hurt people, um, there's a conflict in that. There's a tension in that that's hard to resolve. And for want of a better term, it's been called moral injury. So the committee that I was working on was very interested in what we could do to provide ways for veterans to navigate through moral injury and recover from that. Those kinds of little things are all part of our human trauma. We all encounter things that are like that all the time. And those little traumatic things stack up and eventually they get pretty big. And if you don't resolve them, you get post-traumatic stress. And of course, we all know veterans, post-traumatic stress, it's an issue. So moral injury. And what we found, it was really interesting to me that this actually existed. The United States Army had done a study about readiness. They want to make very sure that if you're going to go into combat, you're ready. And that means physical training, you drill. And it means mental training. You learn chain of command and how to take orders and how to do what you have to do without thinking about it. And in a certain sense, you learn some emotional readiness too, because it's difficult to go in to a fight with your fear. So you have to have some control over your fear. Those emotions are a big part of it. But the thing that was most intriguing for me was the Army decided that spiritual readiness was also important. Your human spirit needed to be engaged in the fight. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to leave it there for a second, because the fact that the Army decided that was important is the main thing I wanted to point out here. What if your human spirit was broken by that experience? What would you do to repair that? Mm-hmm. Well, that was the focus of our little committee. We wanted to figure out what we could do to help people repair the human spirit. And we identified some things that people could do. They could be kind, they could be grateful, they could show respect. I mean, some of these things are things that you learn in drills. You could be honorable, you could be honest. Well, it turns out that things like kindness and gratitude and respect and honor and integrity and all those other wonderful things are actually best practices in business. Businesses that are kind to their customers do much better than businesses that are rude to their customers. It doesn't take any, rocket scientists to figure this out. But there have been studies, real life studies that say, oh, well, this business that was kind did so much better than this business that wasn't. So all of that wonderful research is out there. And our little committee disbanded. And I was left thinking, well, we aren't quite done here, because this is really useful information. And it might be helpful to have a kind of a reminder that says, hey, if you're willing to investigate your human spirit just a little bit, you might be able to connect yourself more authentically with gratitude, or more authentically with kindness, or more authentically with integrity. So if it came from a place that inside is a best practice, what I call best spiritual practices, they're actually attributes of the human spirit. That's a powerful thing. And if you or your organization could do that, you'd change the nature of yourself or your organization in a way that's positive and helpful and forward focused, and definitely better than the opposite, right? So what we're finding is that collaboration works better than competition. Collaboration is more of a human spirit thing. Well, competition is too, but we're taking it out of the fight and we're putting it into the rising tide that raises all the boats. Mm-hmm. It works much better together than it does when you're trying to, be the leader and be the one that's, out in front and crush the competition. And it's like, folks, do we need more war in the world? So I think we've run the course on the competitive spirit, and we're now starting to, in this weird place that we're in, see that we have to find ways to work together, because running away from each other as fast as we possibly can isn't solving anything. It's just creating more distance between us. So a little book that encourages us to come from our best practices of the human spirit, to be kind, to be authentic, to show integrity. There's so many of these. You can think about them all day long. Is a really good thing, especially right about now, where we're finding out that greed really isn't the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
Hello? It never really ever was. And we've got
Mm-hmm.
thousands of years of actual written wisdom that we can refer to on that. So this another drop in the ocean supporting the human spirit, practical best practices, practical spirituality, I like to call it. So More Than Human is all about that. And because it came from work with the veterans, it's such a gift when you're
Mm-hmm.
aware of these things, little things that come along and you spend time and then they have a result you didn't expect later on.
Mm-hmm. That you recognize the expansiveness of those
Yeah,
skills. Mm-hmm.
good way to put it.
Mm-hmm. The expansiveness of it. Sure.
It's, and in a word, it's etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that. And if you're listening, go Google etiquette. But there are certain practices that work, and they're not just about where to put the fork on the dinner table. These are practices that work because they've got thousands of years of experience. It just turns out that it's better to be nice to people than to be rude,
Mm-hmm.
especially if being the leader in your organization or being the person at the cash register is about having people come back to ring that register or to join your leadership. Um, you want to show them the best you possibly can, because we've got way too much of the other.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
know,
totally agree.
fear is not working anymore, people. It's selling advertising, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Selling a lot of advertising.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think people are noticing that too, that everything is so fear-based, and pulling away from that.
In this place where you're doing all
Mm-hmm.
your work, it's so important right now, um, to make this obvious to people in a way that is not just about scaring them.
Mm-hmm.
We have this opportunity to take um, a huge number of people who sort of hit bottom and are very open to something else, to the possibility of something other than what they've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And those could be homeless people or veterans suffering with post-traumatic stress, or people who are just overwhelmed by the news.
Mm-hmm.
But we've hit this place where either the pendulum swung or we're at the bottom of the barrel, however you like to see it. That's the moment where magic can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's in Alcoholics Anonymous where they say, don't give up before the miracle. And we're right there.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that's going through this understands it happens over and over and over again. It's not just being reborn once. You have this opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
become new every moment that you hit bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Every moment of that tension is an opportunity for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every moment of every day. There's no other way to go but up. I think that's where we're all going.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it seems like it's been a long detour, that story from, I think it was World War I, where the Germans and the British were in their trenches around Christmas time. It got made into a movie. And somebody, I forget which side it was, decided to put a little Christmas tree up on the top of the trench in no man's land. And then the other side did. And before long, they were like having dinner together. It was like Germans and Englishmen sharing meals over Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And it all came unwound when the commanders found out what was going on. But our human spirit is not to separate.
Mm-mm.
Our human spirit is to connect. And many of the programs that I've been involved with veterans are all just about human connection, because human connection is so transformative. Is it
Mm-hmm.
50%? Is it 90%? No, but it's enough. It's 15 to 18 or 20%. That's enough to get something started.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, all that's necessary to get that thing started is an invitation. Handing someone a guitar for the first time and saying, "Hey, let's play guitar together." Or if you're a therapist doing this work and someone comes in your office for the first time, what an incredible opportunity, because just by the fact that they're there, things are going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they never talk, you're showing them you're opening the space and saying,
Mm-hmm.
"I am here.
Mm-hmm.
You're here."
And you matter.
And you matter,
And you
right?
matter. Yes.
I don't care what color you are, red, blue, whatever, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. I don't care what your belief system is.
Mm-mm.
We all have this amazing moment right now, being so red and raw and bruised, where we can reach out and say, I feel that too.
Mhm.
Can we just hang out, have a cup of coffee, whatever it is?
Mhm.
A veteran buddy of mine who was in that business, his job was a peer counselor, told me a story once about how he was assigned a young veteran who was very difficult and wouldn't open up, wouldn't talk. And he had to meet with this young man every week. That was you have to fill out your card. It's like a time card. I met with so-and-so, and that person is also filling out their time card. I went to this peer counseling session. So they would meet, and for weeks, they would show up, sit down at the table, and the guy would just be looking at his phone. He'd just be on his phone the whole time. And it took weeks, may have been 10 weeks. But my buddy said to me, one day they went in and the same thing happened. Guy picked up his phone, just went on social media, whatever he was doing. And maybe after about 20 minutes, he finally looked up and looked across the table and said to my buddy, you know what? He said, you're okay. And then he went back to his phone. But that was the moment things changed.
Mhm.
Because the veteran who needed help and my buddy, the veteran who was his peer counselor, had connected
Mhm.
through nothing other than sheer persistence.
Mhm.
Just showing up, being physically present. I'm here for you.
Mhm.
Even
And
if
not
nothing happens, I'm here.
right, and it's not forcing.
No
It's
force.
it's
No.
no force. It's about allowing that person to get comfortable enough to open up. Mhm.
Allowing is key. And it doesn't
Allowing.
matter if you're a CEO or a blown up veteran. We're here because we're here for each other.
Mhm.
We don't have to do it alone.
No.
Even
We're
if we
not.
know nothing at all about what the other person is feeling or doing or experiencing, just showing up,
Mhm.
you're going to get that 15 to 18%, right? A positive reduction in symptoms or whatever the thing is that you're working on. It means so much.
Mhm. It truly does.
So that's a short summary of work with veterans.
Yeah, yeah. And we're actually running out of time. We've had such a awesome conversation. And I think what you do is absolutely wonderful. And I'm so grateful that you are doing all these wonderful things to help people with music, because you really do put yourself out there and try
Thank
to
you.
help in so many different ways.
It's great to be on the team, Deb. I'm really glad to be here and to be able to talk to your audience and talk with you
Hmm.
about this and open the door a little bit on something that's we all have around us in
Hmm.
such great abundance that we can put to work.
Yes. And to really expand people's view about music,
The
that they
view of music.
expand their view about music, that it's so much
I love it.
more. Hmm.
I love it.
Yeah. Why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you?
I don't do this often, but I'll be happy to for your audience. Uh, I still answer my own phone. And if that's the kind of way that you like to communicate, for me, it seems like the authentic communication is important. You can find the website and the show notes and all that, but if you want to answer the phone, if you want somebody to answer the phone for you, I'm here. So that number is 800. Yes, it's a toll-free number, 785-8596, 785-8596, toll-free. Give me a shout. You can't really text to that number, but I'm working on it. It seems like text is the way that the younger people like to communicate, but I have issues with that because there's certain confidentiality and they're always like finding ways to tap into what we're saying to each other that are not happy for me.
Hmm.
Privacy is an important thing. So reach out, call me, 800-785-8596. You can also find that number and more information on quest.musiccare.net. There's free stuff there. Uh, feel free to go and grab it. We'll ask for your email address, but I don't blast people with email. That doesn't work for me. It's got to be authentic or it doesn't work. So it'll ask you, and that'll be great. Then I'll know how to find you. But let's make sure that our connection is authentic, because that's a really important part of where we are in the world right now and how we're going to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You have a Facebook group.
Oh yeah, there's a Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's so many ways. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've got all the bases covered out there. The
Uh-huh.
Facebook group currently has a name called Deficiency to Growth with Music, which is a huge mouthful that I'll figure out how to change into something more sexy when I can figure it out. But for right now, that's it. And Bill Protzmann on Facebook, of course, you can find all that by following that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm out there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, you are. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you, Deb.
for taking the time and finding me.
Oh, it's very meaningful to me. I'm so glad that you accepted the invitation that we're talking.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And hopefully continue to talk.
Let's do.
Yes. So when in doubt, never underestimate the power of prayer. You are being listened to and heard throughout the universe, and it always responds with infinite and eternal love. Remember to go inside and listen through your heart for the whispers of heaven. I love you and God bless you.